Ever had your disabled mom's walker yanked by a Karen who claimed it blocked the sidewalk at sunset? Linda Bennett wasn't ready to sit quietly. She fought back. The neighborhood rallied, and now Karen's packing her bags in shame. You've got a Karen story too, right? Share it below. Ever heard a scream that can stop time, like someone just yanked the rug out from beneath your entire morning? That's exactly what shattered our quiet Saturday around 9 a.m., when my mom's voice cut through the calm neighborhood air like a siren. Mom, Linda Bennett, was out enjoying her usual peaceful stroll, dressed in her favorite floral dress, her trusty walker by her side, the very device that gives her freedom despite her mobility challenges. She had parked the walker carefully on the narrow strip just beside the sidewalk, making sure there was more than enough room for neighbors to pass by without any trouble. She was even chatting softly with Mrs. Jenkins next door, sharing that warm smile she always wears, blissfully unaware that the calm would soon be hijacked. Then came Karen Smith, the one and only Karen from our street, marching down the sidewalk with all the subtlety of a thunderstorm in ill-fitting pastel blouses and a scowl like she was auditioning for sidewalk sheriff. You know the type, self-appointed guardian of the pathways, wielding her rules like they were carved in stone. She caught sight of Mom's walker and completely lost it. "That walker is blocking the sidewalk," she barked, her voice sharp, filled with the sort of conviction you usually hear in disaster warnings. Before I could even process what was unfolding, Karen snatched the walker right out from under Mom, leaving her stranded as if someone had torn the wheels off her only lifeline mid-flight. I swear it was like watching a pirate plunder a treasure chest from the hands of a helpless captain. What kind of twisted logic turns a woman's essential mobility aid into a dangerous blockade anyway? Karen's meltdown wasn't subtle. It was a one-woman theatrical disaster. Huffy face, finger-wagging like she was the self-declared president of some invisible pedestrian patrol. The sidewalk itself was barely 3 feet wide, but Mom had carefully placed the walker flush against the side, leaving plenty of room for anyone to pass. Yet Karen acted like that walker was some siege weapon, blocking the city's only bridge. This wasn't just a piece of metal and wheels, it was Mom's independence, her freedom on wheels. I couldn't help but think, has she ever heard of empathy? Or maybe just the simple art of minding one's own business? But there she was, snatching Mom's walker, as if auditioning for the role of villain in a neighborhood drama. It was surreal, stepping into a world where decency seemed to have taken a one-way trip to oblivion. Mom stood frozen, her face a canvas of shock and hurt. Her eyes met mine in a silent plea, as if asking, "Are you seriously just watching this happen?" Her breathing slowed, as if she could hear the ghostly creak of those missing walker wheels in her mind, the absence threatening to topple her balance. For me, righteous fury bubbled up, that kind of heat begging for a superhero theme song to kick in. I marched right up to Karen, my voice steady but fiercely protective. "Give the walker back, now." But the entitlement oozing off her was almost tangible, like bad perfume laced with audacity. This wasn't merely about a walkway or some neighborhood edict. It was about respect, something Karen clearly tossed out the window with reckless abandon. Have you ever tried reasoning with a bully who refuses to listen? Like arguing with a GPS insisting your house is a lake, you just can't win. Letting someone casually swipe a disabled woman's mobility device and parade it around like a trophy? No way. That crossed every line there is. So I fired up the neighborhood faster than you can say sidewalk justice. Texts, calls, knocking on doors. I became a one-person community watch, fueled by indignation. "Have you seen this?" I'd ask, shaking heads turning into nods, neighbors buzzing with disbelief at Karen's vendetta. Sidewalks are for everyone, sure, but stealing the very thing that lets my mom get around safely? That was a line even Karen's warped logic couldn't justify, not even in the world's most heated HOA meetings. The whole street rallied quickly, turning a ridiculous tantrum into a collective outcry. It felt like organizing the neighborhood against the guy who mows the lawn at 6 a.m. every Sunday. Only this time, the stakes weren't just peace and quiet, they were dignity and mobility. In the end, Karen was booted from our little slice of paradise like a bad rerun nobody wanted back. She packed her ill-fitting blouses and endless scowls, dragging a suitcase stuffed with shame right past our porch as we watched, half amused, half vindicated. Mom's walker was safely returned to its rightful spot, now sporting sticky notes from neighbors promising to keep an eye out for any future sidewalk rule vigilantes. Watching the whole circus unfold left a smirk playing on my lips despite the madness. Who would have thought standing up for Mom's right to a simple, unblocked sidewalk would become the social event of the season? But there you have it. Karen might have fancied herself the queen of the pavement, but kindness, community, and a dash of stubbornness ran the show in the end. Ever had your own Karen encounter turn into an epic neighborhood legend? Share your story below, because believe me, you're definitely not alone. And stick around. The saga of entitlement and neighborhood drama? Oh, it's far from over. It was late morning, sunlight casting long shadows across our usually peaceful cul-de-sac, when Karen Smith, yes, that Karen from down the street, snatched my mom's walker right off the sidewalk like she just grabbed the golden ticket in some twisted contest. There she went, strutting down Maple Lane with this smug look, gripping the walker like it was a trophy for Sidewalk Enforcer of the Year, or maybe the self-appointed queen of pedestrian purity. My cheeks burned red with disbelief and fury, my heart pounding so hard I thought it might break free from my chest as I sprinted after her. "Karen," I called out, trying to keep my voice steady despite the panic rising in my throat. "That walker belongs to my mom, Linda Bennett. She needs it to get around safely. It's not blocking anyone, there's plenty of space for people to walk." But did Karen care? Not at all. Her eyes darted sideways, narrowing like a judge ready to deliver a death sentence. And with a finger wag that might as well have been draped in flashing neon lights, she launched into her patented sidewalk safety lecture. "Sidewalks are for walking, not for parking," she hissed, her tone deadly serious, as if auditioning for block captain of some secret pedestrian police force. It was déjà vu. In fact, it reminded me of the ridiculous garden gnome drama last summer, when Karen declared that poor little guy a threat to the HOA's color harmony, sparking a feud that dragged on for weeks. Have you ever met someone so stubborn they create their own alternate reality just to feed their obsession with control? Karen certainly lives in a bubble where a walker apparently clogs an entire city block and where logic takes a hiking trip without her. Trying to reason with her was like arguing with a GPS that stubbornly insists your destination is a lake instead of your own driveway. I threw everything I had at her. Calm explanations, gentle reminders that Mom would be stranded without her walker. But Karen just volleyed back the same tired lines about civil responsibility, maintaining clear pathways, and community standards. All said with a tone that brooked no argument, like she was reading from an invisible script designed solely to steamroll everyone else. Behind me, Mom stood frozen, her face a heartbreaking portrait of confusion and hurt. Her usual spark flickered dimly as she watched the woman who'd stolen her lifeline paraded around like a badge of honor. Neighbors peeked out their windows, eyes wide with disbelief and curiosity. One guy even dragged a lawn chair out onto his porch, popping open a bag of popcorn like we were starring in some painfully awkward reality show. Ever been stuck in an argument where the other person just isn't listening, no matter how hard you plead? Like my friend Linda Bennett's struggle last year when her neighbor refused to acknowledge her service dog on the property line, no matter the laws or logic. As Karen continued her triumphant march, hoisting that walker as if it were the crown jewel of the neighborhood, my frustration hit a boiling point. "Are you serious right now?" I muttered under my breath. Watching her parade around like the self-appointed sidewalk sheriff on a power trip was infuriating beyond belief. Mom glanced between us, her face a mix of wounded disappointment and the fierce fire she's carried forever. It was like witnessing a slow-motion disaster unfold, a nightmare playing in real time. I wanted to scream, "Put the walker down, Karen. This isn't a game." But she was lost in her own delusion, blind to the pain she was causing right before her eyes. It reminded me of that awful time Dylan, the famously troublesome kid from 2 streets over, pushed a little boy's lunch tray off the table just because he wanted to prove he was boss. Karen was pulling the same stunts, but instead of a silly lunch tray, she had taken something essential for my mom's independence. The audacity was staggering. I knew then that enough was enough. This wasn't just a private problem anymore. It had blown up into a community crisis. Taking a deep breath, I pulled out my phone and fired off a dramatic group text to our neighbors. Who's ready to end Karen's ridiculous sidewalk rules once and for all? Within minutes, the responses rolled in. Max Bennett, Mom's cousin, and the guy still holding a grudge from the Garden Gnome saga, was the first to jump on board. Soon, Mrs. Heller, the grandma famous for her legendary blueberry bushes, 2 houses down, and even the mailman chimed in, confessing his own one-too-many run-ins with Karen's absurd street decrees. What could have been a lonely standoff suddenly morphed into a buzzing neighborhood movement. Who would have thought that a stolen walker could unite us faster than free pizza at a summer barbecue? That impromptu meeting marked the beginning of the end of Karen's reign of sidewalk terror. Neighbors who once avoided her icy glare now stood shoulder to shoulder with quiet resolve, firm yet patient. Together, we laid out the facts clearly and decisively. Sidewalks belong to everyone, including my mom, who depends on that walker for her independence. Karen's claim that the walker blocked the sidewalk wasn't just petty, it was cruel. Watching her ego gradually crumble was like witnessing a luxury car sputter and stall at the starting line. For the first time, her icy stare wavered, and that ill-fitting pastel blouse looked less like a fashion statement and more like a costume for the defeated suburban Karen show. I swear you could see the wheels turning in her head as she realized she'd picked the wrong block to bully. When it was all over, the neighborhood made one thing crystal clear. Karen's days as the self-appointed sidewalk sheriff were done. She packed her bags, muttering about unfair treatment and neighborhood witch hunts, slipping away down the street like a deflated balloon. Meanwhile, my mom's walker sits proudly back on our sidewalk, polished and even decked out with little notes from neighbors promising to guard it like a treasured heirloom. The victory tasted so sweet, it felt like the finale of our own episode of Justice Served, Sidewalk Edition. Who would have thought standing up for my mom's right to move safely could become the highlight of our year? Ever had a Karen encounter blow up into a legendary neighborhood story of outrage, laughter, and change? Share your stories below. I'd love to hear how you fought back. Dusk had settled over our little cul-de-sac when I finally hit my breaking point. Karen Smith, self-styled neighborhood sheriff, professional nitpicker, and now outright menace, had pushed us all too far. It wasn't just the fact that she'd snatched my mom's walker, her lifeline to mobility and independence, accusing it of blocking the sidewalk like it was some kind of criminal weapon. No, this was bigger. This wasn't just a mom problem anymore. It was a full-blown community crisis. We couldn't let Karen's nonsense steamroll us any longer. That night, I fired off a dramatic rallying cry in our neighborhood group chat, fingers trembling with a mix of frustration and determination. Who's with me to ban the Karen? Within minutes, the replies poured in. Linda Bennett was first, her signature exasperated emoji trailing behind her message. Absolutely, Dylan. Finally. Max Bennett, with his trademark sarcastic wit, chimed in. Does this come with a sheriff's badge retirement party? Count us in. Even Mr. Thompson, the stoic retiree known for rarely engaging, declared his support. Our sleepy little street was waking up and ready to defend itself. That very evening, right where Karen had made her ridiculous sidewalk law stand, with Mom's walker as the evidence, our neighborhood staged an impromptu Karen intervention. Walking past the usual quiet lawn chairs and flower beds, the air was buzzing with a curious mix of tension, humor, and a kind of desperate camaraderie, as if we had stumbled onto the set of a dark comedy. Linda doubled over with laughter, recounting the time Karen lectured her for an hour about the proper angle to plant tulips, as if she'd earned some sort of horticultural badge. Max's eyes gleamed with righteous fury when he shared how Karen once slapped him with a bogus no parking ticket for a bike that, as far as we knew, only existed in her imagination. Neighbors exchanged knowing glances and muffled giggles, while the grown-ups nodded grimly. This wasn't just nuisance anymore. It was harassment. Then, someone dropped the bombshell story. Karen had actually shoved my mom's lunch tray right out of her hands earlier that week. The collective gasp was unanimous. This was a level of meanness that demanded more than memes and complaints. What truly united us was how utterly absurd Karen's claim was that a walker, essential for my mom's every step, was allegedly a dangerous obstruction warranting confiscation. This was no petty micromanaging. This was an assault on her dignity and independence. It echoed memories of the old leaf blower wars, the relentless early morning noise battles that turned our block into a battlefield until we finally banned those noisy machines. But this was different. This was personal. Everyone piled on with their own Karen horror stories. Mrs. Jenkins recounted how Karen had police guarding the height and tilt of her Christmas wreath like it was the border of a war zone. Mr. Patel had us doubled over telling how Karen threatened to blacklist his award-winning hedge in some imaginary neighborhood aesthetic registry. Even my friend Linda shared her struggle with Karen's relentless sidewalk safety lectures, which made every stroll feel like tiptoeing through a minefield of complaints. The laughter was intoxicating. Ban the Karen quickly evolved from a punchline to our anthem, our battle cry. Ever been part of something that starts as pure annoyance but somehow snowballs into a movement? Like when your street finally bans the relentless leaf blower wars and reclaims peaceful weekend mornings? That was exactly what was happening here. By the time we raised our iced coffees and homemade lemonade and a makeshift toast, all the tension had melted into a comforting camaraderie. We joked that Karen fancied herself a Disney villainess, with her dramatic finger-wagging and incredible talent for turning a simple sidewalk into a battlefield. But the stories weren't just funny. They were reminders that no one should face a bully like Karen alone. Gathering like this transformed our sleepy cul-de-sac into the birthplace of a neighborhood superhero squad. Not with capes or masks, but with comfy shoes, megaphones of kindness, and an unshakable commitment to common sense over entitlement. We were ready to push back together against the nonsense that threatened our community's peace and dignity. And then came the moment we'd all been waiting for, Karen's grand finale. From across the street, I watched her pace, like a caged lioness, in faded pastels. Cheeks creased in a scowl, deep enough to carve canyons. Her eyes flicked nervously over our united front, the sea of neighbors who'd clearly had enough of her sidewalk terror. Then, in a bizarre but oddly poetic twist, she pulled out a battered suitcase she'd clearly packed in advance. Like a villain realizing her spotlight had dimmed forever, Karen was retreating, her reign collapsing under the weight of neighborhood unity. It was a spectacle, an ego crashing so spectacularly it felt almost theatrical. And we, the cast and audience, basked in the satisfyingly poetic justice of entitlement, crumbling beneath the power of collective defiance. Back on the porch, Mom reached for her walker, like reclaiming a long-lost throne. Linda and Max taped goofy yet heartfelt notes to it, a mix of half-joking promises to guard it like the crown jewels and genuine pledges to support her independence. That walker had transformed, in one furious evening, from a mere mobility aid to a beacon of resilience and community spirit. Watching Mom's face light up, her eyes sparkling with renewed confidence, reminded me why standing up wasn't just necessary, it was empowering. And, let's be honest, a little bit fun. Because when a sidewalk rule tries to steamroll you, sometimes what you need is your whole neighborhood shouting, "Not today." So, if you ever find yourself squaring off against an over-the-top HOA rule, a relentless noisy leaf blower, or a self-appointed Karen wielding power she clearly doesn't have, remember this story. Sometimes all it takes is neighbors coming together to say, enough. When absurd entitlement tries to turn your community upside down, that's when legends are born. Have you ever rallied your block against a ridiculous nuisance or a tyrannical neighbor? Share your stories below, because if there's one thing this saga proves, it's that united we stand stronger, and that no Karen can outshine the power of a whole street saying, "No way." It was late afternoon, the golden hour when shadows stretch long, and the neighborhood settles into a deceptive calm. But not today. Today felt electric, charged with a quiet determination born from weeks of pent-up frustration. I stood shoulder to shoulder with neighbors I'd shared countless lazy summer barbecues and casual howdies with, all united by one goal: to end Karen Smith's reign of sidewalk terror once and for all. If you've been following this saga, you already know Karen, the self-appointed sidewalk sheriff who snatched my mom Linda Bennett's walker right off the sidewalk like it was some kind of bizarre trophy, then declared it blocked the path, acting like the sole arbiter of pedestrian etiquette. Remember back in part 1 when she practically shoved Mom's walker aside, lecturing everyone about sidewalk real estate like she was royalty? Well, now the playground wasn't empty. We were ready, and this time, we had the whole neighborhood behind us. Rallying everyone felt like assembling a team of Avengers, and neighborhood watch officers rolled into one, without any superpowers, just years of stories and built-up resentment. My brother Max stood at my side, jaw clenched, scanning a sea of familiar faces. There was Mr. Patel clutching a weathered photo of Karen's laughable sidewalk obstruction registry. Her desperate attempt at control quickly met with eye rolls. Mrs. Jenkins nervously adjusted her glasses, her mind flashing back to last Halloween when Karen publicly shamed her over wrong decorations. Remember how that turned a fun holiday into a stress fest? Even shy Emily from down the street stood tall, holding a homemade "We Hoss Linda's Walker" poster, like it was a shield against Karen's petty tyranny. Ever get that electric buzz? The split-second stillness before everything explodes? That was us, ready to turn the tide against the diva of the cul-de-sac, backed by stories and solidarity. It reminded me of a friend's struggle with a meddlesome HOA president who tried to ban their barbecue grills because the smoke disturbed the neighbors. Sometimes it takes a village to change the rules. Then, just as if on cue, Karen arrived, strutting down the street like a self-crowned monarch, her trademark scowl sharp as a blade. Her hands gripped a crumpled, worn handbag as if it were a badge of authority. But as every pair of eyes locked onto her, the heat of collective disapproval crashed into her like an icy wave. Her lip twitched, the first hint of doubt cracking her usual armor of arrogance. She muttered something about sidewalk safety and public order, her go-to lines to justify years of passive-aggressive bullying, including the days she left Linda stranded when she snatched the walker in plain sight. I stepped forward with Max beside me, voice low but steady with the weight of all who stood behind us. "Karen Smith," I said, "your days of deciding what blocks the sidewalk are over. This neighborhood is done playing your games. If only there'd been microphones, we would have sounded like a rallying cry." The look on her face was priceless. The exact moment a diva's mic cuts out mid-performance, ego and entitlement suddenly deflating in real time. Have you ever witnessed someone's arrogance crash and burn live? It's strangely satisfying, like watching a temper tantrum fizzle when the spotlight suddenly goes dark. The tension snapped sharply as neighbors stepped up one by one, sharing their own hilarious and infuriating run-ins with Karen's self-styled sidewalk justice. Linda held her walker firmly, eyes burning with quiet strength, like a queen reclaiming her throne. "You took this from me," she said, voice steady and sharp slicing through the silence. "And now, with everyone here, it's clear the sidewalks belong to all of us, not your ridiculous claims of authority." Mr. Patel raised his photo again, exposing the flimsy pretense behind Karen's so-called registry. Miss Jenkins recounted how Halloween had turned into a battlefield thanks to Karen's nitpicking. Max pulled up a chain of texts from Karen, filled with baseless accusations and passive-aggressive demands. With every story, every piece of evidence, Karen's castle of entitlement crumbled. It reminded me of when our neighbor's persistent feud over hedge heights finally ended because everyone agreed enough was enough. There's power in community, especially when bullies think they can silence you. That wave of unity, it was like a dam breaking, releasing years of frustration in one collective roar. Karen wasn't about to go quietly, of course. She scrambled through her handbag like a soap opera villain searching for a weapon, eyes wild with desperation. "This is harassment," she blurted, voice trembling on the edge of hysteria. A neighborhood witch hunt, but surrounded by dozens of steady witnesses, her words echoed hollow, bouncing off walls built by truth and solidarity. Max calmly held up undeniable proof of her relentless bullying, and with nowhere left to turn, Karen snatched her infamous suitcase and stormed off down the cul-de-sac, stage left, her meltdown unscripted and spectacular, like watching a diva's tantrum fizzle when the crowd loses interest. Have you ever seen someone's ego unravel live? It's strangely beautiful, a mix of vindication and disbelief. Walking home with Mom and Max, the surreal feeling of victory washed over us. We'd close the chapter on a ridiculous, exhausting ordeal that morphed into a neighborhood legend. Remember the uproar over leaf blower guy a few years back? This felt like that, only louder and more triumphant. Mom's walker, once stolen and weaponized as a tool of oppression, was back where it belonged, not just a mobility aid, but a symbol of resilience. Funny little notes appeared taped to it. Protected sidewalk hero. Our street's MVP, promising our collective peace and protection. The whole block buzzed with renewed camaraderie and quiet humor, proof that even the biggest bullies crumble when a community stands firm. Ever had a petty neighborhood feud spark a whole block bonding moment? It's wild how shared struggles build unexpected friendships. So, is this the end? Hardly. It feels more like the first act of an epic saga. Will Karen try sneaking back to the next block party, hoping to reclaim her crown? And what about the mysterious new neighbor rumored to have a secret weapon for entitled bullies? Whatever the next twist, we're ready. Because when a whole neighborhood stands as one, even the fiercest Karen doesn't stand a chance. Have you ever turned your own Karen encounter into a story of community triumph? Share your tales below. Let's keep laughing, sharing, and standing strong, one sidewalk at a time. It was a bright Saturday morning, the kind of peaceful start you'd expect in a quiet cul-de-sac where everyone's biggest crime is forgetting to bring in their mail. But that calm shattered the moment Karen Smith burst onto the scene, puffed up like she'd swallowed a balloon animal, eyes blazing with entitlement. There she stood, wagging her finger at my mom's walker, which was neatly parked by the curb, accusing it of blocking the sidewalk as if it were a menace to public safety. You have to imagine the sheer absurdity. A sleek, cherry-red walker, a lifeline for my disabled mom, suddenly cast as the villain in Karen's self-made drama. When Karen snatched that walker in broad daylight, dragging it off like a treasure she could confiscate, I swear it felt like the plot twist in a really bad reality show. Neighbors peeked through their blinds, stifling laughter and exchanging knowing glances as Karen muttered about neighborhood witch hunts and unfair treatment, dragging her suitcase with the flair of a soap opera's defeated diva. I had to pinch myself. Did this ridiculous, surreal showdown really just happen right here on our street? Let me rewind to where this madness all began. My mom, Linda Bennett, was enjoying her usual morning walk, the kind of slow, steady stroll that gives her a taste of independence amid her daily challenges. That walker is more than a mobility aid. It's freedom striding on four wheels. Then along came Karen, our self-anointed sidewalk sheriff, armed with a fierce sense of authority no one asked for. To her, that walker was an obstacle, a blight on the sidewalk's honor. Suddenly, our once peaceful neighborhood erupted into a battleground of absurdity. Sound familiar? Like when Mrs. Jenkins and Mr. Patel went head-to-head over head shapes and paint colors last year, the turf wars of the most trivial kind. You ever argue with someone so deep in their own narrative that no facts can penetrate? Like telling your GPS your house isn't underwater, only to have it stubbornly reroute you to Lake Street? That was Karen. Stubborn, unyielding, and theatrically aggressive. She even shoved a tray of mail into our garden once with a flick of her wrist, a move so savage it sparked gossip for weeks. But here's where the story flips from frustrating to downright legendary. After Karen's theft of Mom's walker and that memorable tray shove incident, I, Max Bennett, realized enough was enough. This wasn't just about a walker. It was about defending the soul of our community. So I rallied the neighbors for an impromptu anti-Karen powwow. Picture it. A motley crew armed not with pitchforks or protest signs, but with sharp wit, shared annoyance, and a little bit of old-fashioned neighborhood spirit. Mrs. Jenkins regaled us with tales of Karen's earliest outbursts, like the infamous Halloween wreath feud that had the whole street chuckling for days. Mr. Patel added his story of being blacklisted from what Karen dubbed her sidewalk obstruction registry, all because his hedge was too bushy. We laughed, gasped, spilled tea, and in that chaotic circle, a plan took shape to show Karen that her reign of sidewalk terror was over. Ever been part of a collective stance where someone's absurd antics somehow weld everyone together? It's like forming a neighborhood superhero squad, fueled by iced coffee, shared grudges, and a common cause. The buildup reached its crescendo the day we confronted Karen as a united front. Voices rose in unison, Linda's steady courage, Mrs. Jenkins' sharp-tongued clarity, Mr. Patel's calm resolve, and every other neighbor who had endured Karen's overreach. The once untouchable queen of the sidewalks found herself surrounded, her smugness cracking like a dropped porcelain vase. Her eyes widened in disbelief, like she'd just missed her cue in a badly scripted reality show. No Oscar-worthy monologue, no groveling apologies, just the tacit acceptance that her time was up. She eventually faced a public apology for her behavior, humbly conceding that her self-appointed authority did more harm than good. Watching her ego implode was like witnessing a diva's tantrum fade when the sound cuts off, replacing screams with stunned silence, and then laughter. We chuckled quietly as she shuffled off, muttering about unfair treatment and neighborhood witch hunts, tugging her pastel blouse over a defeated suitcase. Our verdict? Sorry, Karen, this street belongs to all of us, not just your self-appointed rulebook. But let me tell you, the real hero in this whole saga was my mom, Linda Bennett. Seeing her reclaim her walker, the very symbol of her independence and resilience, hit me like a warm sunrise. Now her walker sports cheeky little notes, badges of neighborhood solidarity, protected by the streets of Bennett Lane, daring any future sidewalk sheriffs to step up and test us again. That simple red walker went from just a mobility aid to our community's emblem of strength and humor, a quiet testament that entitlement will never win. Despite Karen's ridiculous crusade, Mom continues to stride forward with quiet dignity, inspiring us all in ways words can barely capture. It's like a friend once told me during their own struggle with a particularly overbearing neighbor, sometimes the smallest acts of resistance snowball into the strongest community stories. Who would have thought that a stolen walker could bind neighbors, spark laughter, and forge a legendary tale about standing up to entitlement? Just when you think the curtains finally dropped on the Karen drama, whispers of her possible comeback at the upcoming block party are already starting. But honestly, we're ready. New neighbors like Dylan, remember from the mail tray incident, are tuning in, swapping their own Karen encounters, armed with fresh stories and battle-tested strategies. This saga has evolved beyond a neighborhood nuisance. It's a shared legend that makes us laugh, learn, and stand taller together. Ever had your own Karen moment that spiraled into an unexpected community victory? Drop your stories below. Trust me, we're all ears. Because when entitlement knocks, our sharpest weapon isn't anger, it's unity, sprinkled with humor and a fair dose of courage. Who knows what the next chapter holds? One thing's certain, Bennett Lane is far from done. Thanks for tuning into this insane entitled Karen story. If you're craving more wild Karen showdowns, check out our video on the right. Or if you trust YouTube's instincts, pick the one on the left. Whichever you choose, brace yourself. There's plenty more meltdown madness where today's story came from.